So after coming out flat against LSU, Nick Saban issued a challenge to the Crimson Tide. Play the game with the intensity and the ability that you have. And the Crimson Tide certainly answered the call against New Mexico State this past weekend, absolutely annihilating the opponent, and every stage of the game looked very good doing it. But it did not come without its costs, because the Crimson Tide had multiple injuries at key positions that will put them in a precarious situation going forward, and we need to talk about that. Plus, why the Crimson Tide may be in a unique position to experience a massive boom in recruiting, and we need to break it all down. But before we do, as always, y'all know the drill. I want to hear from you. Hop down to the comments, give me a Y for yes, N for no, and with the recent news of Damani Jackson decommitting from USC, and with his relationships to the Crimson Tide, do you believe that the Crimson Tide are in a prime position to get the 5-star cornerback out of California as a part of the 22 class? Let me know what you're thinking. If you are new to the channel, be sure to subscribe. Hit that bell notification. I do constant college football content. I'm on my push to 10,000 subscribers. I would love to have you along that journey. And if you enjoyed this content, be sure to like and comment down below. Those interactions, though small, are really massive to content creators such as myself. But with all of that being said, we need to first talk about the injuries that were sustained during Saturday's game. And specifically, I really want to focus on the running back position. Because before the year ever started, that was a position group that when I looked at that relative to the nation, I was contending frequently that the Crimson Tide held the deepest running back room in the nation. When you looked at the rankings of the guys they had in that room, the ability of the guys they had in that room, and the depth of it. And now, as we fast forward into November, that depth is really needed, because the Crimson Tide now have 3 running backs out, 3 very talented running backs out in Roydell Williams, Jace McClellan, and Kamar Wheaton, the 5-star freshman out of Texas. And this is a situation where the Crimson Tide still have Brian Robinson, who's having a solid year when he's actually allowed to run the ball, and then Trey Sanders, who most Crimson Tide fans have been expecting to see a little bit more of. But with these injuries, now he's going to be utilized in the game plan. Trey Sanders is an individual coming out of IMG, a top 10 recruit in the nation in his respective recruiting class. This young man has got phenomenal ability. The injury bug has bit him and the bad luck bug has bit him, but now that all of that is behind him, I think that the future is incredibly bright for this young man, and I'm very excited to see what he can do on the football field, because his depth of ability is something that could be a massive benefit to the Tide offense, especially in areas such as the passing game. If the Crimson Tide ever want to do some 2 running back splits with Brian Robinson and himself, that could make a defense really choose. Is it going to be the bruising back who's been very effective in Brian Robinson, or is it going to be the back that can hurt us not only in a traditional sense, but out the backfield? He provides a lot of flexibility, and because of that, I'm very excited to see how he does in his time playing. But outside of those 2 names, as phenomenally talented as they are, the Crimson Tide desperately needs more depth at that position. And that has fans and media members alike talking about certain names and whether they could make a move to the running back position. One such name that is really intriguing is Christian Leary. Christian Leary is interesting for a few reasons, and I really want to talk about 2, in my opinion, that are really unique. First and foremost is his playmaking ability and game-breaking speed. This kid coming out of high school is one of the fastest players in the nation, and that's why every institution in the nation wanted nothing more than to add him into their class. The second is his ability to affect a game out the backfield. Much of the same explanation I just gave for Trey Sanders, but now you're talking about an individual that actually plays the slot wide receiver position. His playmaking ability and flexibility to be a genuine force out the backfield would be very intriguing, and it'd be something I'd be interested to see, especially if Bill O'Brien continues to utilize some of these option routes. Putting Christian Leary in the backfield could make for some interesting chess moves because of those option routes Bill O'Brien likes to run. He already is so fast, has so much playmaking ability, but this is a young man that has a deep understanding of the route tree and how to get open because of his time at the wide receiver position. So he is a name that I think is intriguing. The question is, though, with the injury to JoJo Earl, will the Crimson Tide move a talented individual like Leary off of that slot position? And that all depends. Tyu Jones-Bell is there if need be to back up Slade Bolden, a very talented individual who, if you go back to the spring game, actually was one of the more impressive pieces that people just weren't talking about coming out of the spring game, but every chance he got, he was making moves, and especially after the catch. He's got a lot of playmaking ability after he gets the ball in his hand. The other name that I've seen mentioned that is intriguing is Jalen Milroe, the quarterback out of the state of Texas. Jalen Milroe, a one-time Texas Longhorn commit, ended up flipping to the Crimson Tide, and the Crimson Tide fan base was exhilarated that he did, and for reasons. This kid has got an incredibly high ceiling. He's got a very strong arm. He'll continue progressing in that aspect, but he is a phenomenal athlete. And reports coming out of the Crimson Tide are saying he's one of the fastest individuals on the team. He is not built like your normal freshman. In fact, during the preseason, there were videos of the players working out, and many were questioning who Jalen Milroe was because he looked like a sophomore linebacker, a junior linebacker. And it could even be a Demoy Kennedy, the linebacker for the Crimson Tide, who has running back experience in high school and did so at a very high level. This kid is physical. He's incredibly athletic, and it'd be a ton of fun, almost invoking Miles Jack to watch a linebacker transition to that running back position and wreak havoc. But this moves me into what I want to talk about as far as recruiting, because this week, big news dropped as it pertains to a 5-star out of California, Damani Jackson. Damani Jackson's one of the most coveted players in the nation, the number 2 corner in the nation, currently sitting as the number 6 overall player in the nation. He's a long-time USC commit, but with all of the chaos that has occurred at USC, he decommitted this past weekend, and this was something I talked about when Mykel Williams decommitted from USC. Would we see these ripple effects? And fast forward, we have the answer to that question. If I had to imagine, the Crimson Tide would look to take 4 corners in this class, and in a perfect world, the 4 corners they would take, Fegans, who they have, Damani Jackson, Earl Little Jr., and Denver Harris. It's looking very good for Damani Jackson and Earl Little Jr. I think Denver Harris is in a situation where he's looking around. LSU is in shambles. Texas is in shambles, and now you're between A&M and Alabama. So that's going to be a race we really have to follow because he's also a coveted 5-star. But there's another name I want to talk about in relation to Earl Little Jr., and that is Marvin Jones Jr., a 4-star on 24/7 Sports, just outside of that 5-star range. But if we move over to On3 Sports, they actually have him ranked as the number 1 prospect in the nation. 6'4.5" edge rusher that has got unbelievable upside. And the interesting thing about Marvin Jones Jr., not only is he still growing into his body, he's still growing into his position. He started his high school career out at a wide receiver and then moved to edge and has climbed the recruiting ladder since then in moving up the board. This young man is a really, really fun kid to watch. Now, this is someone who Crimson Tide Nation would love nothing more than to add into this class, especially with Jeremiah Alexander. The Crimson Tide have done a phenomenal job the past few classes of getting in high caliber edge rushers, but to continue that with a Jeremiah Alexander and a Marvin Jones Jr. would just be the cherry on top of it all. So I'm very interested in hearing from y'all for a few things. First and foremost, what are your thoughts on the injury situation? Do you believe we will see Christian Leary, or do you think that it could be Jalen Milroe making that transition to the running back position? Or could we be seeing a linebacker be invoking the spirit of Miles Jack and making the move to running back? This is going to be something we have to watch because it does have large implications for the Tide moving forward. Also, let me know what you're thinking about Damani Jackson. The timing of his decommitment on the heels of an Alabama visit is certainly interesting, and it's something we have to watch because Nick Saban has got as good of a track record as anybody with pulling these high caliber DBs and then sending them to the NFL. And so why not Damani Jackson? Hop down to the comments, let me know what you're thinking. If you're free tonight around 5:30, stop by for the live stream. You already know we talk college football every Monday, 5:30 to 6:30. Love to have you. That's it. See ya.